It's like being in hell, to tell you the truth. It's like being in hell. It's surreal. It seems like the province of British Columbia is burning up right now.
After one of the heaviest downpours in US history, the storm is generating an amount of rain that would normally be seen only once in more than 1,000 years.
I've experienced many earthquakes, but nothing like this.
And just as the hurricane season gears up to batter the other side of the country, the strongest earthquake in modern history may just be the beginning of a very difficult end to 2017.
The headline in Barbuda's main newspaper today, "Destruction Unreal." This was Barbuda before Irma hit, as you can see, just lovely. This is Barbuda today. The Prime Minister of Antigua and Barbuda says that Barbuda is now barely habitable.
Genocide. The mayor of San Juan, Puerto Rico, has used the right word.
What we are going to see is something close to a genocide.
Because this is a biblical chastisement.
Okay, I read Revelations, I read Ezekiel. They were describing it in the terms that they understood at the time.
Right.
So what could cause those things today? And unfortunately, today there's a lot of those things.
There certainly are.
That are coming our way. And is it the first time really, I mean, people have been talking about this for 2,000 years. First time really that we can say, a lot of the big ones are now in play?
Absolutely. You know, we say on Passover, why is this night different from all other nights? And people ask me, Joel, why is this period of history different from all other periods of history? I mean, Jesus said in the last days there'll be wars, rumors of wars, earthquakes, famine, but we've had that for all of the last 2,000 years. So why is this period different? And the answer is Israel. For the only document on the face of the planet that said that Israel would be reborn as a country in the last days, and Jews would regather into the Holy Land after centuries of exile, was the Bible. And this Bible prophecy, most people in the world didn't believe it. Actually, many Christians didn't even believe it. Right. That's a whole replacement theology that got developed that said God is done with the Jews. But May 14th, 1948, almost exactly 60 years ago, Israel was reborn. And now we've got a situation that makes this period of history different, because Israel is what Bible scholars call the super sign.
Declare the glory of God in Isaiah, in Joel, in the Gospels, in Revelations, about there will be signs in the sun and the moon, where the sun would turn to sackcloth and the moon would turn to blood. The scientific website, NASA, has 5,000 years of eclipses. Several thousand years in the past, thousands of years in the future. And the reason why is because God is very mathematical. He set up everything like his own personal watch, his own time clock. And so I wanted to see if there were any significant solar lunar eclipses over the next 5 or 6 years. In 2014 and 2015, there were 4 total lunar eclipses in a row. Well, how often does that happen? So I went back to NASA's website in history, and I noticed there were not 4 blood moons in a row at all in the 1800s, in the 1700s, or in the 1600s. So I thought, wow, this might be something unique. And then I noticed it happened twice in the 1900s. Israel became a nation in 1948. And then you have these 4 blood moons in 1949 and 1950. And then in 1967 and 1968, to have Israel recapture Jerusalem, the holy city, to have it back in their hands. But I went ahead and went back to 2014 and 2015, and I was looking at the dates. These series of eclipses are truly astronomical to have these events happen, and then also tied to what prophetically the Bible says is going to be happening with Israel. During these next 2 years, not only 4 blood moons, but a total solar eclipse, a partial solar eclipse. And when it comes to sending signals, God wants to work according to his calendar, not ours. We know when they fall on the feast days, God is trying to tell us something.
I have determined that it is time to officially recognize Jerusalem as the capital of Israel. I've judged this course of action to be in the best interests of the United States of America and the pursuit of peace between Israel and the Palestinians.
With this statement, U.S. President Trump reversed 70 years of U.S. policy in the Middle East. He added that plans to move the U.S. Embassy to Jerusalem are also underway, though the process might take a few years. Israeli President and Prime Minister hailed the announcement and encouraged other nations to also move their embassies.
Jerusalem's status is perhaps the most disputed in the world. Now, U.S. President Donald Trump has added even more drama. Trump ended 7 decades of U.S. ambiguity on the issue, long fought over by Israelis and Palestinians. As expected, the move has rattled the Islamic world. Iran said serious repercussions would await the U.S. and Israel.
By doing this, they will be hit harder than before. The Islamic world will undoubtedly stand up to them. The enemy will absolutely be unable to achieve its desired goals on the issue of Palestine. Palestine will be liberated.
Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan had threatened to sever ties with Israel before Trump announced his decision. While meeting with the press in Ankara during a visit by Jordan's king, Erdogan warned the U.S. could create public unrest throughout the Islamic world.
Haberlerle ilgili üzüntülerimi bir kez daha ifade etmek istiyorum. Kudüs, Sayın Trump, Müslümanların kırmızı çizgisidir. Filistin halkının yaraları kanamaya devam ederken, her gün hak ihlalleri, zulümler, baskılar sürerken, İsrail'e destek mahiyetinde böyle bir kararın alınması sadece uluslararası hukukun ihlali değil, aynı zamanda insanlık vicdanına da vurulmuş ağır bir darbedir.
United Nations Chief Antonio Guterres reiterated that a two-state solution is the only way out.
In this moment of great anxiety, I want to make it clear there is no alternative to the two-state solution. There is no plan B.
The U.S.'s allies in Europe, including the UK, France, and Germany, have also expressed disagreement over Trump's announcement. Meanwhile, Canada said its embassy will remain in Tel Aviv, adding that Jerusalem's status can only be determined as part of peace talks.
In Palestine, however, hundreds of angry protesters took to the streets of Gaza and burned U.S. and Israeli flags, while Palestinian leader Mahmoud Abbas warned of dangerous consequences.
These denounced and rejected measures create deliberate constraints to all the efforts towards realizing peace and reflect the United States' withdrawal from practicing its role as a peace mediator.
Israeli sovereignty over the entire city of Jerusalem isn't accepted by the global community, and its status is considered an issue that should be resolved through negotiations between Israelis and Palestinians. Although Trump said the U.S. is not taking a position on how the city should be divided, leaders around the world expressed concerns that the move could widen the gap between Israel and Palestine.
Palestinians have issued a stern warning about the consequences of the U.S. plan to relocate the American embassy in Israel from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem Al-Quds. The leader of Palestinian resistance movement Hamas said that Washington's move would be a dangerous escalation that crosses all red lines. Ismail Haniyeh stressed that the measure will enable, quote, the extremist regime of the Israeli prime minister to further Judaize the city. Hamas also called on all Palestinians to come out on Friday and mark it as a day of rage against the U.S. move. Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas also described the move as unacceptable. The spokesman for the president said Abbas made some phone calls with leaders of Russia, France, Vatican, and Jordan, reiterating the position that Al-Quds is the Palestinian capital according to international and Arab resolutions and law. The Palestinian resistance movement Hamas has called for a new Intifada or uprising in response to the U.S. recognition of Jerusalem Al-Quds as Israel's capital.
إننا نطالب وندعو وسنعمل على إطلاق انتفاضة في وجه الاحتلال الصهيوني. القرار الأمريكي عدوان على شعبنا، إعلان حرب على شعبنا الفلسطيني. أقول سيندم ندم شديد على هذا القرار.
President Trump's announcement on Jerusalem has a very worrying potential impact. It is a very fragile context, and the announcement has the potential to send us backwards to even darker times than the ones we are already living in. The European Union has a clear and united position. We believe that only realistic solution to the conflict between Israel and Palestine is based on two states.
French President Emmanuel Macron says he disapproves of the Trump administration's recognition of Jerusalem Al-Quds as Israel's capital, calling it a unilateral decision. British Foreign Secretary Boris Johnson also said the U.S. move will not help resolve the Palestinian issue. Meanwhile, the Russian Foreign Ministry expressed serious concern over Trump's decision, saying it threatens security in the Middle East. Australian Foreign Minister Julie Bishop also said Canberra will not relocate its embassy to Jerusalem Al-Quds.
The General Assembly is now voting on draft resolution A/ES-10/L22 entitled Status of Jerusalem. The voting has been completed. Please lock the machine.
This is the first time I have exercised the American right to veto a resolution in the Security Council. The exercise of the veto is not something the United States does often. We have not done it in more than 6 years. We do it with no joy, but we do it with no reluctance. The fact that this veto is being done in defense of American sovereignty and in defense of America's role in the Middle East peace process is not a source of embarrassment for us. It should be an embarrassment to the remainder of the Security Council. As I pointed out when we discussed this topic 10 days ago, I will once again note the features of the President's announcement on Jerusalem that are most relevant here. The President took great care not to prejudge final status negotiations in any way, including the specific boundaries of Israeli sovereignty in Jerusalem. That remains a subject to be negotiated only by the parties. The position is fully in line with the previous Security Council resolutions. The President was also careful to state that we support the status quo regarding Jerusalem's holy sites, and we support a two-state solution if that's what the parties agree to. Again, these positions are fully consistent with the previous Security Council resolutions. It is highly regrettable that some are trying to distort the President's position to serve their own agendas. What is troublesome to some people is not that the United States has harmed the peace process. We have in fact done no such thing. Rather, what is troublesome to some people is that the United States had the courage and honesty to recognize a fundamental reality. Jerusalem has been the political, cultural, and spiritual homeland of the Jewish people for thousands of years. They have had no other capital city. But the United States' recognition of the obvious, that Jerusalem is the capital and seat of the modern Israeli government, is too much for some. First, some have threatened violence on the street, as if violence would somehow improve the prospects of peace. Now today, buried in diplomatic jargon, some presume to tell America where to put our embassy. The United States has a sovereign right to determine where and whether we establish an embassy. I suspect very few member states would welcome Security Council pronouncements about their sovereign decisions, and I think of some who should fear it. It's worth noting that this is not a new American position. Back in 1980, when Jimmy Carter was the American president, the Security Council voted on Resolution 478, which called upon diplomatic missions to relocate from Jerusalem. The United States did not support Resolution 478. In his remarks, then Secretary of State Ed Muskie said the following, quote, "The draft resolution before us today is illustrative of a preoccupation which has produced this series of unbalanced and unrealistic texts on Middle East issues." Specifically regarding the provision on diplomatic missions in Jerusalem, Secretary Muskie said this, quote, "In our judgment, this provision is not binding. It is without force, and we reject it as a disruptive attempt to dictate to other nations. It does nothing to promote a resolution of the difficult problems facing Israel and its neighbors. It does nothing to advance the cause of peace." That was in 1980. It is equally true today. The United States will not be told by any country where we can put our embassy. Buried even deeper in the jargon of this resolution is the accusation that the United States is setting back the prospects of peace in the Middle East. That is a scandalous charge. Those who are making it should consider that it only harms the very Palestinian people they claim to speak for. What does it gain the Palestinian people for their leaders to throw up roadblocks to negotiations? A peace process that is damaged by the simple recognition that Jerusalem is the capital of Israel is not a peace process. It is a justification for an endless stalemate. What does it gain the Palestinian people for some of their leaders to accuse the United States of being hostile to the cause of peace? It gains them nothing, but it risks costing them a great deal. The United States has done more than any other country to assist the Palestinian people, by far. Since 1994, we have given over $5 billion to the Palestinians in bilateral economic assistance, security assistance, and humanitarian assistance. The United Nations Relief and Works Agency for Palestinian Refugees operates schools and medical facilities throughout the region. It is funded almost entirely by voluntary contributions. Last year, the United States voluntarily funded almost 30% of UNRWA's budget. That's more than the next two largest donors combined. And it's vastly more than some of the members of this council that have considerable financial resources of their own. I'll be blunt. When the American people see a group of countries whose total contributions to the Palestinian people is less than 1% of UNRWA's budget, when they see these countries accuse the United States of being insufficiently committed to peace, the American people lose their patience.
And now, while the official recognition of Jerusalem as the capital of Israel is monumental, it is also the spark that will set the Middle East ablaze, because now the Muslim world has no choice but to invade Jerusalem so they can declare it as their own. The announcement has caused mass panic and fear, confusion on a level never before seen, because all of the great strides towards peace in the Middle East and a two-state solution seems to have vanished the very moment Trump made his declaration. But this is what we call an Illuminati moment. This is the moment when out of chaos we create order. This will be what causes everyone to realize something fucking biblical is happening. And because of that, our clergy are the only ones that can answer their terror-filled questions. This is the moment when every door is open to Christ's true clergy. To victory, with or without you. Give yourself to God. I'm Archbishop William Scoggins. Israel, they're coming for you.
I do want to warn you that what you have seen thus far is but a wake-up call. I want you to prepare. Now, to other pressing matters. This is to both Israel and the United Nations. Do not divide my land. There is a Palestinian solution. It does not involve the reduction of Israel. Israel is to remain intact. If its borders are reduced, you shall know my anger. Now, my brothers and sisters, spread what you have learned today. Do not let others die in the dark. Bring them to my light, so that they may live. And above all else, love your Father and love each other.